afternoon, promising they'd visit again soon. I waved as their minivan pulled away, still uneasy. Monday morning, I found it, taped right to my front door, a formal written warning from the Willow Ridge HOA. 3 violations from the weekend: unregistered guests, noise disturbance, and improper vehicle parking. Right beside it was a bright red flyer proudly announcing the neighborhood's upcoming 4th of July celebration, with none other than Karen Whitmore listed as the Grand Marshal. I stared at it for a long moment. Somehow I knew this wasn't the end, not even close. That evening, my parents surprised me. I'd nearly forgotten my own birthday. Mom came bustling in, singing off-key, carrying a homemade chocolate cake with flickering candles. Dad followed with a neatly wrapped box tucked under his arm. "You guys didn't have to drive 3 hours," I said, touched. "Nonsense," Mom grinned, setting down the cake. "We'd never miss your birthday." We settled on the front porch with glasses of sweet iced tea, watching the sun dip low on the horizon. For the first time that day, I felt myself relax. Dad asked about work, and I filled him in on my recent promotion. It felt good, almost normal. If only I knew what was coming next. The evening felt perfect as we sat on the porch, sipping sweet iced tea and watching the sun sink behind the trees. I told my parents about my recent promotions at work, and for a brief moment, everything felt just right, until a black SUV slowly crept past my house. It circled the block once, then twice. "Someone must be lost," Mom murmured, squinting toward the street. But I had a sinking feeling. The SUV parked directly across from my driveway. Out stepped Karen Whitmore, clipboard in hand, flanked by a balding man in a golf shirt and a thin woman with sharp features and severe glasses. They marched toward us like a firing squad. "Jordan Walker," Karen called out before even reaching the walkway. Her voice was shrill, carrying across the quiet neighborhood. "Those individuals on your porch need to be identified immediately." My stomach dropped. "Karen, these are my parents. They surprised me for my birthday." The balding man puffed out his chest and pulled out a tablet. "No visitor registration on file," he announced with satisfaction. "That's violation number 2, Mr. Walker. I'm Thomas Reynolds, HOA Vice President." He grinned like he'd just caught me in a crime. "And this is our secretary, Emily Richardson." Karen took a step onto my front porch, uninvited. "Unregistered guests are strictly prohibited. We take community security very seriously, Mr. Walker." My mom blinked, clearly bewildered. "Security? We're just visiting our son for his birthday." Emily adjusted her glasses coldly. "Without proper registration, ma'am, we have no way of verifying that. You could be anyone." Dad stood slowly, his towering frame commanding the space. "We've met briefly, Ms. Whitmore," he said coolly. "I'm Samuel Walker, Jordan's father." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes, the judge." She forced a smile. "Even more reason for you to respect the rules, sir. Legal professionals should understand the importance of following regulations. Legal professionals also understand the concept of reasonable restrictions and the difference between that and harassment," Dad responded calmly. Thomas Reynolds stepped forward, emboldened. "We're issuing a $500 fine for this violation, effective immediately." He handed me a pink slip. "Payment due within 10 days. I stared at it, shocked. "You're fining me $500 because my parents came to visit? For my birthday?" "The first violation was a warning," Karen replied with fake patience. "The second incurs a financial penalty, as clearly stated in Section 7 of your covenant." "This is ridiculous," I snapped. "They're my parents. They're here for a family celebration." "Rules apply equally to everyone," Emily interjected, pushing her glasses higher. "Or they mean nothing." Dad placed a steady hand on my arm. "Jordan, may I see the exact bylaw they're referring to?" Karen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps you should review the covenant you signed, Judge Walker. But this isn't your courtroom. We operate under the rules our community agreed upon." Thomas casually raised his phone and began taking photos of my parents' car. "Documentation purposes," he mumbled. "Is that really necessary?" Mom asked, her voice tight. "Completely," Karen snapped. "We document all violations with photographic evidence." Satisfied, the trio turned and walked back to their SUV in perfect formation. As they drove off, I noticed several neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains. A few ducked back the moment I glanced their way. "I'm so sorry about this," I muttered to my parents. "I didn't think they'd actually go this far." Dad unfolded the fine notice carefully, his jaw tight. $500. Excessive for a simple visitation. "Have you read your full covenant yet, son?" I admitted it. I hadn't read the whole thing. Like most folks, I'd skimmed that massive HOA document when I bought the house, signing where they told me. Now, staring at the fine, I felt the weight of that mistake. "You've got a problem here, son," Dad said grimly, folding the notice. "This kind of behavior, it doesn't get better unless someone steps in." Mom looked worried. "Jordan, does this mean we'll have to register every time we visit you?" "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "This is getting out of hand." That night, after the cake and presents were cleared, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying Karen Whitmore's smug face, the way she snapped photos like we were criminals. Finally, I got up, dug out my copy of the Willow Ridge HOA covenant, and started reading. The visitor registration policy was there, buried deep, but the wording was specific. Extended stays, guests using community amenities like the pool or clubhouse, but nothing about family visits to private homes. The next morning, I needed answers. I walked 2 blocks over to see my neighbor Sam, a guy who'd lived here for 5 years. Sam opened his door cautiously, peeking out like he was afraid someone might be watching. "Has the HOA always been this strict about visitors?" I asked. Sam's eyes darted around before he stepped out onto the porch. Not until Karen Whitmore took over as president last year. Before that, the rules were just rules. Nobody enforced them." "Has anyone ever challenged her?" Sam let out a bitter laugh. "The Ramirez family tried last Christmas. Got fined because their grandparents stayed for a week. Next thing you know, their garbage accidentally stopped getting picked up. They complained. Boom. Weekly landscaping violations. They ended up moving." My gut twisted. This wasn't about rules. It was control, pure and simple. That afternoon, I found a note jammed in my mailbox. No envelope. Just a printed notice. "Board meeting. Tuesday, 7 p.m. Your attendance requested no signature, but the handwriting was unmistakably Karen Whitmore's." I called Dad. "They're summoning me Tuesday night." Dad was quiet. Too quiet. "What are you thinking?" I pressed. "I'm thinking," his voice had that dangerous calm, what Mom always called his courtroom tone. "It's time we find out exactly what authority your HOA really has under Pine Haven County law, and more importantly, what they don't." After we hung up, I checked my email and felt my stomach sink. The HOA had sent a blast to all residents announcing new security measures, mandatory background checks for visitors, ID cards required for anyone using community facilities. The email claimed it was due to recent security concerns from unauthorized visitors. Before I could process that, another email pinged into my inbox from an anonymous sender. "Don't fight them. They always win." And then, a text from a blocked number. "Tuesday's meeting isn't optional if you want to stay in good standing." I looked out my window. The manicured lawns, the identical mailboxes, they didn't feel safe anymore. For the first time, Willow Ridge Estates didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a trap. The next morning at 5:30 a.m., my phone rang. My heart jumped. It was Katie. Her voice trembled. "Jordan, my water just broke. The baby's coming. 6 weeks early." I shot out of bed. "Stay calm. I'm coming right now." Katie and Daniel were staying at my place while their house was under renovation. The doctor had assured us the baby wouldn't come until next month. Clearly, the baby had other plans. Within minutes, I was pounding on their door, helping Katie into my car while Daniel grabbed the hospital bag. Katie winced in pain as another contraction hit hard. "Hang in there. We'll be at Pine Haven Memorial in 15 minutes, I said, gripping the steering wheel tight. But as I backed out of the driveway, headlights blinded me. A black SUV blocked the exit, and standing there, smug as ever, was Karen Whitmore. Katie gritted her teeth through another contraction as I helped her into the passenger seat. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her face pale from the pain. Daniel scrambled behind us with the hospital bag, his voice shaky. "We've got this," I told them both, trying to stay calm. 15 minutes to Pine Haven Memorial, Katie. Just breathe. As I reversed out of the driveway, headlights suddenly blinded me. A black SUV lurched forward, blocking my exit. My stomach dropped the second I saw who climbed out. Karen Whitmore. And she wasn't alone. Thomas Reynolds stood smugly by her side, phone already recording. Two other HOA board members flanked them, arms crossed like bouncers. Going somewhere with unregistered guests? Karen sneered, pointing directly at Katie, who was hunched over in the seat, moaning in pain. My sister is in labor, I shouted. Move your damn car, Karen, now. Karen didn't budge. You should have considered emergency situations before repeatedly violating our community rules, Mr. Walker. Daniel ran up, voice cracking. Please, our baby's coming early. We have to get to the hospital. Thomas zoomed in with his phone camera, grinning. Documenting this. More violations. HOA policy. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Are you serious right now? This is a medical emergency. Rules don't bend for emergencies. Karen shot back, glancing at her watch. You want to bypass the visitor policy, Mr. Walker? You'll need a doctor's note, in writing, confirming this isn't another excuse. Katie let out a blood-curdling scream. I looked down. Blood was soaking her pants. Call 911, I yelled at Daniel, who was already dialing with trembling hands. For the first time, Karen's smug facade twitched, but she stayed planted, arms crossed. She wasn't moving. Neighbors started peeking out their windows. Then Mrs. Henderson in her bathrobe came rushing from across the street. Karen, what on earth are you doing? She shouted. That woman needs help. Stay out of this, Doris, Karen snapped. This is HOA business. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. Katie's cries echoed through the neighborhood while Karen's black SUV remained firmly parked. Then, sirens. Paramedics arrived but had to park down the street, dragging a gurney past the barricade. They worked fast, assessing Katie, their faces grim as they loaded her into the ambulance. I'm coming with her, Daniel choked out, climbing in beside his wife. I turned back to Karen, my fists clenched. Move your damn car, now. Karen lifted her chin. The board has voted, she declared loudly, making sure the gathering crowd heard every word. Effective immediately, due to your repeated violations, all unregistered guests are banned from Willow Ridge HOA. Your family is no longer welcome here. Gasps rippled through the crowd. You can't ban someone's family, Mrs. Henderson snapped. Actually, we can, Thomas chimed in, waving his tablet. Section 47.3 grants emergency powers to protect community standards. I stared at them in disbelief. This is insane. You're playing God. Karen smirked. Tell your father, the judge. His title means nothing here. We have our own laws. Finally, after what felt like forever, Karen moved her SUV. I jumped in my truck and sped toward Pine Haven Memorial, hands shaking with rage. An hour later, Katie gave birth to a tiny but thankfully healthy baby girl. Tears burned my eyes as I held my new niece, Sophia Walker. Once Katie was resting, I stepped outside and called Dad. My voice trembled as I told him everything. For a long moment, there was silence on the other end. Dad, are you there? Finally, his voice came low and dangerously calm. I'm here, son. My father's voice was eerily calm on the phone. Text me Karen Whitmore's and Thomas Reynolds' full names and addresses, he instructed. What are you going to do, I asked. Nothing illegal, he replied, but there was steel in his tone. But no one threatens my family or endangers my new granddaughter. That evening, while Katie and the baby slept, Dad showed up at Pine Haven Memorial. He wasn't the easygoing man from our family barbecue anymore. This was Judge Samuel Walker, the man who had sentenced criminals and stared down corrupt politicians. I've made some calls, he said quietly. The Pine Haven County Recorder's Office pulled some interesting files on Willow Ridge HOA. What kind of files? Daniel asked. Dad opened his laptop. For starters, their HOA was improperly incorporated. Half the bylaws were never legally filed with the county. And Karen Whitmore has been signing official documents using a title she's not legally entitled to. Can that help us? I asked, leaning forward. Dad nodded, his eyes glinting. It's just the beginning. Turns out Thomas Reynolds' landscaping company, Reynolds Property Services, has an exclusive contract with the HOA, approved by a board he runs. A plan was forming. I could see it in Dad's eyes. That same look he'd get before handing down a major ruling. Jordan, when you get home, check your mailbox, Dad instructed. There should be a letter about your property taxes. Why does that matter? Because, he smiled, your taxes fund the county government, and the county has jurisdiction over HOAs. I happen to know who chairs the Pine Haven County Oversight Committee. As we talked, my phone buzzed, texts and photos from neighbors. Karen and Thomas had set up orange cones at the subdivision's entrance, a massive sign declaring, "Visitor checkpoint, all guests must present HOA approval." "They've lost their minds," I muttered, showing Dad the pictures. His face darkened. "They're not just being mean-spirited anymore, Jordan. Some of this is illegal." Later that night, Dad insisted on driving me home. As we neared Willow Ridge Estates, the absurdity of the situation hit us. Thomas Reynolds sat at a folding table, clipboard in hand, checking IDs like a security guard. I rolled down my window. "We're coming through." Thomas glanced at his list. "Your father can enter, but he'll need to register for future visits. New policy." Dad leaned over. "Under whose authority are you restricting access to a public road?" Thomas puffed up. "The HOA board's authority." Dad smiled coldly. "Interesting, because according to county records, this entrance road is public property, maintained by county tax dollars." Thomas's smirk faltered. "That's not, I've checked the facts," Dad cut him off. "Now move." We drove through without another word, but the war had only just begun. In my mailbox, exactly as Dad predicted, was the property tax letter. But there was more. A certified letter from the HOA. Heart racing, I tore it open. "They're fining me $1,500 for a pattern of visitor violations and threatening a lien if I don't pay in 30 days, I told Dad. He read it carefully, then smiled, almost pleased. "Perfect. Perfect. How is this good news?" Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. "Because they just put their illegal actions in writing, and that, son, is exactly what a judge likes to see." The next morning, I woke to the sound of car doors slamming. Peeking through the blinds, I spotted 3 county government vehicles parked at the Willow Ridge HOA Community Hall. Officials in suits carried boxes and briefcases inside. A text from Mrs. Henderson flashed across my phone. "Something big happening at the HOA office. Karen looks furious." I threw on clothes and hurried outside. Neighbors gathered, whispering as county officials moved in. Karen's face was red with rage as she argued with a tall woman in a gray suit. "You can't just barge in here. This is private property," Karen shrieked. "Actually, Ms. Whitmore," the woman replied, holding up papers, "this is a legal inspection under County Code 43.7. We have the authority to review all financial and operational records." Thomas stumbled out in his bathrobe. "What's going on?" "The County Oversight Committee is conducting a surprise audit," someone whispered. A tap on my shoulder made me turn. Dad stood there, looking calm and composed. "Morning, son. Lovely day, isn't it?" I gawked at him. Did you do this?" Dad's expression stayed neutral. "Let's just say I made a call to an old friend, Judge Martinez. He chairs the County HOA Oversight Committee." I hadn't even known that existed. "Most people don't," Dad said. "That's how HOAs like this get away with overstepping their authority." Karen stormed toward us, pointing at Dad. This is your doing, isn't it?" Dad smiled politely. "If your records are clean, Miss Whitmore, you have nothing to worry about." By the time we returned to Willow Ridge Estates, the entire community was buzzing. Word had spread like wildfire, and an emergency HOA meeting had been called for 7 p.m. sharp. This time, unlike all the conveniently scheduled weekday meetings most working folks couldn't attend, every homeowner received notice. The community center was packed, standing room only. I grabbed a seat toward the back, noticing a few county officials stationed quietly in the corner, clipboards ready. At the front, Karen Whitmore sat stiffly beside Thomas Reynolds and the rest of the HOA board. Their faces were pale, their usual arrogance replaced by visible discomfort. Karen cleared her throat. "We're here tonight to address concerns raised by certain residents and county officials." She barely finished the sentence before a neighbor stood up. "Is it true you've been awarding contracts to companies you personally benefit from?" Karen's jaw clenched. "That allegation is under review." Another voice rang out. "What about banning family members? My grandchildren can't even visit me anymore." Thomas leaned into the mic. "The visitor policy protects all residents." "From what?" Mrs. Henderson interrupted sharply. "From having our loved ones nearby." Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. That policy was never voted on, someone else called out. You just enforced it. Chaos erupted. Years of frustration boiled over. Neighbors shared stories of arbitrary fines, denied renovation requests, and outright intimidation tactics. The room buzzed with anger and betrayal. I felt a light tap on my shoulder. Taylor Reynolds, the reporter from the Pine Haven County Chronicle, leaned close. Quite the story unfolding here. Care to comment? She whispered. Before I could speak, Karen's voice sliced through the noise, shrill and desperate. This is happening because of him. She jabbed a finger at me. Jordan Walker and his judge father. They're outsiders trying to destroy everything we've built. They don't understand our community values. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of every gaze, knowing whatever I said next would be tomorrow's headline. I moved here because I love this community, I said, my voice steady. All I ever wanted was for my family to visit, without being treated like criminals. Heads nodded. People murmured in agreement. But this isn't about visitors anymore, I continued. It's about accountability. It's about whether a handful of people can create their own laws and enforce them however they see fit. Karen leapt up. You have no proof. This is character assassination. That's when the tall woman from the county finally stood. Actually, Ms. Whitmore, we do. We've uncovered substantial evidence of financial impropriety. Gasps echoed across the room. This meeting is adjourned, the official declared. Effective immediately, the county is freezing all HOA funds and suspending this board's authority until our investigation is complete. Thomas dropped his head into his hands. Neighbors sat in stunned silence as people slowly filed out. Dad appeared beside me. Tomorrow will be interesting, he murmured. The county judge agreed to hear an emergency motion on that visitor ban. Will it work? I asked. Dad's expression hardened. Karen and her board have operated outside the law for years. It's time someone called them out. At the exit, Karen and Thomas cornered us, faces twisted with rage. You've declared war on the wrong people, Karen hissed. We have friends in this county. Dad smiled coldly. So do I. The difference is, mine are all within the law. Judge Samuel Walker's voice carried through the tense room. We've uncovered at least 16 violations of state law by this HOA, he stated firmly. But what's most disturbing is the selective enforcement of these rules. My son's family was banned for a simple family visit. Yet when Board Secretary Madeline Brooks' extended family stayed for 3 weeks last summer, no action was taken. A wave of gasps swept the crowd. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably while Madeline sank lower in her seat, avoiding everyone's eyes. This ends now, Dad declared, his tone final. I've submitted formal complaints to both the Pine Haven County prosecutor and the State Attorney General's office. Karen Whitmore lunged toward the folder in Dad's hands, hissing, You have no right. 2 residents stepped in, blocking her path. The room erupted into shouting until Thomas Reynolds banged his gavel. Order! Order! A woman stood up, Mrs. Patel, her voice strong. My husband's a CPA. He's questioned the HOA's finances for years, but no one listened. May I see those records? Dad handed her a copy. Page 37 is particularly interesting. Karen's face drained of color. This meeting is adjourned, she shrieked. No, it's not. Rose Henderson stood tall. Our bylaws allow us to vote for immediate removal of board members. I move to do just that. Second, several voices echoed across the room. Karen grabbed her purse, snarling, This is ridiculous. You'll be hearing from our lawyer. As she stormed toward the exit, Dad called out, Ms. Whitmore, you might want to delay that call. The county fraud investigator would like a word with you. She's waiting outside. Karen froze mid-step. Through the window, everyone saw a woman in a dark suit standing next to a police car. The color drained from Karen's face. You set me up, she whispered bitterly, turning toward me with pure hatred in her eyes. This isn't justice. It's revenge. Dad remained calm. No, Ms. Whitmore, this is accountability. Suddenly, Thomas Reynolds shoved his way through the crowd toward me. You think you've won? I've got friends in every real estate office in this county. You'll never sell your house. Your property values will crash when I'm done spreading rumors. Before I could respond, a phone flashed. Ms. Patel's teenage daughter smirked. Got that on video. Should I post it now or later? Just then, the county investigator stepped inside. Karen Whitmore, Thomas Reynolds, I need to speak with you regarding the Willow Ridge HOA's financial records. They were led away as the remaining board members huddled together in shock. What started as a simple family visit had unraveled their entire power structure in one unforgettable night. Weeks later, I watched a reporter on TV. In a shocking development, 5 HOA board members faced criminal charges after a county probe revealed massive fraud, all triggered by a dispute over family visitation rights. The doorbell rang. Officer Michael Jefferson smiled. "You've got visitors." My sister Kate and her kids ran up the driveway. "No clipboard Nazis today," she laughed, hugging me tight. Later, Rose sat with Dad and me, grinning. "Remember that pool project canceled 3 years ago? Turns out they stole over $200,000. We traced it to an offshore account." My phone buzzed with a text. "Back off or your house burns next." I showed Officer Jefferson. "That's the 4th threat this week," he frowned. "They're scared." Dad nodded. "Good. The prosecutor's offering deals to anyone willing to flip on Karen and Thomas." Suddenly, tires screeched. Thomas stormed up the walkway, violating his restraining order. "You destroyed everything," he screamed. Jefferson appeared. "Sir, you need to leave. Now." "This was a perfect neighborhood until you moved in," Thomas spat. Mr. Washington from across the street chimed in. "Funny. Just got a $20,000 above asking offer. Turns out people like neighborhoods without corrupt HOAs." Police cruisers pulled up. Thomas was hauled away as neighbors applauded. That night, a knock came at my back door. Madeline Brooks stood there shaking. I shouldn't be here, but Karen kept files, blackmail, photos, dirt on everyone. She's planning something for court. I called Dad immediately. By morning, the assigned judge had recused himself. At the courthouse, Karen looked confident until a stern new judge entered. Karen's lawyer tried. "Your Honor, this is a vendetta." The judge cut him off. "This is fraud." Karen's facade crumbled. "I want to change my plea," she blurted out. "I'll testify about everything. Developers, county inspectors, bribes." The courtroom gasped as Karen exposed a decade-long corruption scheme across 17 communities. 6 months later, I sat by the new community pool, built with recovered funds. Rose grinned, handing me a lemonade. All she had to do was let your family visit. Dad tossed a newspaper down. "Former HOA president sentenced to 7 years. County commissioner resigns." "Funny," Dad smiled. "Sometimes the smallest injustice reveals the biggest crimes." My phone buzzed. I'd been elected the new HOA president. Our first rule? All families welcome, anytime. As the sun set over Willow Ridge, I smiled. Karen was right about one thing. Rules are rules. But here in America, no one, not even an HOA, is above the law. The story of Willow Ridge Estates is more than just a tale about an overreaching HOA. It's a powerful reminder that unchecked authority, no matter how small or local, can grow into something dangerous when left unchallenged. What began as a simple family barbecue turned into a battle for basic rights. The right to have loved ones visit, the right to enjoy your own property without harassment, and the right to live free from corruption. It exposes how people like Karen Whitmore and Thomas Reynolds use rules not as a means of protecting the community, but as weapons to control, intimidate, and enrich themselves. But the most important lesson is that standing up, even when it's uncomfortable, matters. It took courage, the knowledge of the law, and the willingness to fight back to expose years of fraud and abuse. Too often, good people stay silent, thinking it's easier to avoid conflict. But silence is exactly what empowers people like Karen. In the end, the law was on the side of what's right. The corrupt were exposed, and the community reclaimed their neighborhood. This story proves that no one, not even a powerful HOA president, is above the law. And sometimes fighting back against a small injustice is what finally brings the biggest corruption to light. As we grow older, many of us just want peace in our homes and our communities. But peace doesn't mean letting others trample over what's right. True peace comes from fairness, accountability, and knowing that our neighborhoods are safe, welcoming places where families can gather, children can laugh, and no one lives in fear of petty tyrants with clipboards. That's the America we all believe in, and it's worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this story and believe that no one, not even an HOA, should be above the law, Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know. Have you or someone you know ever dealt with a crazy HOA or a power-hungry neighbor like Karen? And if you love stories about justice, standing up for what's right, and HOA drama, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. We've got plenty more HOA tales coming your way. Share this video with your friends and family, because sometimes the smallest stories carry the biggest lessons. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, around here, family is always welcome.